Now, over the past couple of years or so, there's been a lot of controversy over Liverpool Street Station and current plans to rebuild it. But this is not the first time that this has happened. Once again, we're going to dive into my little library and bring out this rather interesting document. There's no date on it, but I believe it was published in 1976, at a time when there was a public inquiry underway regarding the future of Liverpool Street and its neighbour Broad Street. Liverpool Street, you may well know. It's a station in the City of London. It is in fact the busiest station in Britain at the time of writing this script. It's served by mainline trains to East Anglia, as well as the Overground, the Underground and the Elizabeth line. It first opened in 1874, having been built by the Great Eastern Railway. Its current status is nothing new. It's always been a very busy station. Broad Street was a different story. It had opened in 1865 and was the city terminus of the North London Railway, as well as including a goods station for the London and North Western Railway, the North London's close allies. It was popular in the 19th century, but its route was not a very fast or direct one. With the arrival of the Underground and the electric tram, fewer and fewer people wanted to use Broad Street. At the time the report was published, it presented a gloomy prospect. By the 1970s, it was clear that something would have to be done about both stations. Neither was really fit for purpose, but for totally opposite reasons. One wasn't used enough, the other was overused. The biggest problem identified with Liverpool Street in this brochure was overcrowding. Of pedestrians, of road traffic, of trains and of track. Interchange between trains, buses and the Underground was very poor. The surrounding streets were congested with motor vehicles and pedestrians. The track into the station was congested. Journeys from the station were uncomfortable and trains were often delayed. And the buildings were generally just quite shabby. They don't provide a section on what the problems with Broad Street are, but I guess if you'd asked, they'd just have waved an arm in its general direction and said, "Come on, look at it." But aside from the question of overcrowding, the brochure identifies problems with the station elsewhere in the text, which were similar to the problems at Liverpool Street. Shabby buildings, poor interchange. Actually, they describe the buildings as outright obsolete. Well, anyone can talk about problems, but what was the solution? British Rail proposed knocking it all down, both stations, just demolishing the lot, lock, stock and barrel, and in its place building this. This would certainly be unique among London's termini. There's a sort of hexagonal motif about all this. The architecture is pure brutalism. The brochure promises a great deal from this new station. There's a bus station, there are offices, there is a hotel, there is a hostel, there are some Abercorn rooms. I mean, what station is complete without some Abercorn rooms? I am sick of going to stations and having nowhere to store my Abercorns. They promise more in the text. Squash courts, open spaces, exhibition rooms, a public meeting hall which would double as a theatre and or cinema, a library, luncheon clubs, restaurants, shops, a livery hall, a gym, medical facilities, a nursery and a coach park, which seems like quite a lot. The skeptic in me wonders how much of this would actually have been built if the plans had gone ahead. The reason I think this is because there had been a great deal of opposition to the rebuilding work, led by no less a figure than the poet John Betjeman. Ever since the destruction of the original Euston station, Betjeman was always on the front lines whenever British Rail threatened to knock something down. Incorporating facilities for the public benefit might well have been a means of softening the public response. As for the offices, shops and restaurants, well, the fact of the matter was that British Rail was short on money, as railways basically always are. Commercial development would cover some of the costs through rent. What you might be wondering is, where are the trains supposed to go? The answer is, underneath it all. Broad Street would go all together and its services would be folded into Liverpool Street. There would be a concourse above that with a glass roof to let the daylight in, and then all these big hexagons would go on top. Liverpool Street is already below street level. Against the advice of engineers in the 1870s, it was designed to provide an easy connection to the below-ground Metropolitan Railway. But it looks like this might have been even further down. The redevelopment would cover not only Broad Street and Liverpool Street stations themselves, but also the adjoining land that was owned by the railway. Personally, I'm not a fan of this proposal. That's partly because I think the original Liverpool Street station is a work of art. But also, if you don't mind me getting on my soapbox for a moment, I take the view that a station should be a focal point. It should be clearly identifiable for what it is. It's not something that should be buried. It should announce its presence as part of the community. I'm not saying you can't do anything else with the site. St. Pancras incorporates a hotel at its entrance, and Marylebone has a rather delightful block of offices at the front. Waterloo has a war memorial. But these things serve to emphasise the landmarks, they add to the station's presence. The proposal for Liverpool Street seems like it's almost embarrassed about the fact that there are trains there. I would also say that one problem with brutalist architecture is that it needs to be kept clean and in good nick, and I'm not sure I would have trusted British Rail of the 80s to do that. I could easily see those big skylights getting grubby and misted up. And while the concourse depicted on the back of the brochure has all the optimism you'd expect from an architect's sketch, it frankly looks like it would be as gloomy as the station it replaced, being all underground. I'm reminded of stations like Cannon Street and Fenchurch Street, which are also buried under office blocks, and are also quite gloomy. I mean, it might have been an impressive development to rival the Barbican estate, but I suspect that as a station it would have been quite unpleasant. It's all academic, of course, because this development did not happen. The brochure suggests that construction would have begun in 1978, and would have carried on over a 10-year period in order to maintain train service while construction was going on. What actually happened was a certain amount of compromise. A tower block was built on top of the old station, but much of it was kept as is. It has since undergone a great deal of restoration and now looks as impressive as it must have done when it was first built. In some ways, perhaps more so. Access is better, and we don't have to worry about the impact of hundreds of smoky steam trains. Broad Street was not so lucky. Its services were indeed sent over to Liverpool Street as well as Moorgate. The station was closed in 1986 and the site was redeveloped. In the 21st century, the line that formerly ran into Broad Street was rerouted at Shoreditch to connect with the East London line, and it's now part of a circular route on the London Overground. At Broad Street itself, there is basically nothing to suggest that a station was even there. Personally, I think it's a great shame. It was a beautiful station, even if it wasn't all that useful by the end. I understand BR's reasons for knocking it down, but I think it's a pity they couldn't have found some other use for the structure. The brochure includes this questionnaire on what you, the passenger, think should become of Liverpool Street. Whenever I come across one of these old forms, I'm always tempted to fill it in, send it off, and see what happens. And now, once again, Liverpool Street is under threat of being rebuilt. The station is crowded again. The railways are short of money again. And once again, the conflict between local, historical, and commercial interests has reared its head. Frankly, I fear this may be a futile battle in the end. Ultimately, it comes down to rail enthusiasts and architecture enthusiasts versus people with lots and lots of money. But it's interesting to see the same problems echoing down over half a century. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your kind support. You are the skylight to my underground concourse. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.